I want to sort of set the scene about how it once would have looked here, because it's really, really hard. And I know that when I started this journey, I started to disassemble all the buildings and take away the roads and the power lines, and you suddenly see the sandstone, you see the basalt, you see the trees, the variation of vegetation in different areas, pockets of different vegetation. And so you've got this salt water and then freshwater creeks and little springs that would spring up, and all around those waterways people lived, traditional, peaceful coexistence with the land, and they understood it and they knew that they had a role to protect it. And I guess in my capacity now as a Dharug person, coming into that role of awakening other people as I'm learning things, I feel a really strong sense of responsibility. You know, when you look around, you can just imagine this whole place as its natural environment. It would have been so beautiful. There would have been little naois, little canoes, bark canoes in the water, people fishing from those canoes with fishing lines, little piles of sand in the middle there where they'd have a little fire and they'd cook their fish on the fire there. It was such a different time. I can only imagine little fires being lit, little smoke areas, you'd know where people were. And we had a connection with the saltwater people, our freshwater mob up there. I guess for us, and I know through my own childhood, I had more to do with the Dharug, the Hawkesbury River, and I swum in there. I've only swum in Parramatta River a little bit. Mum swum in the Parramatta River more than I have, and she'll tell me stories of her brothers actually making canoes out of corrugated iron and tin off the road, and tar off the road, and just putting the ends together, going out on Parramatta River and fishing for eels, and then take them home. Mum would cook them up. They say that we've lost all connection to traditional ways. Well, that is a contemporary way of still maintaining an old connection, you know. And for me, the eels are still there, and I use the analogy or the metaphor of us being those eels, being adaptable, resilient. We change colour. You know, the thing about eels, the fascinating story of eels is they merge and they move between saltwater and freshwater. And apparently what happens is they only mate once in their lifetime. And so at a certain time, they suddenly have this urge to head to the Coral Sea. All of the eels along the east coast move out of the rivers and they change. They become fat. Their mouths and anuses close. They seal off. They don't eat for the whole journey. They turn silver, ready to go to the sea. And that's the time when the Parramatta mob at Parramatta would sit down. That was big feast time. It was around autumn time too. All this big rain would have been part of that. You'd be looking at full moon, high tide, and at Parramatta there's a big space there where the water drops down, and it's where freshwater and saltwater come together. And the eels would lie there in wait, and that was the time when they would signify all the mobs from everywhere, you know, Wiradjuri mob, Dharug, Dark and Young, all of them would come together and have a big feast on the eels at that time. And that was also a time of trading, exchange, marriage, all those things would happen. And, you know, it's funny for me now because I know Parramatta pretty well, and my mum does too, although it's changing rapidly now. It's becoming something I can't recognise anymore, and we're trying to fight to just keep some of the white historical buildings, let alone anything else. But I think the more that we talk about those personal stories from place, the more people understand the importance of preserving those places. So it's probably why I do a lot of those sort of talks about connections to particular places. I go into schools and they'll say, oh, we want to do Aboriginal education. So, well, how about looking at the environment where you're living and work out the waterways near your school and look at what's going on around there, what animals are native to those areas. You know, what can you do in your everyday to care for the environment, to protect those animals or to preserve them or to, you know, encourage them. And it changes the way schools start thinking about things. They start to really look on a deeper level rather than just a tokenistic handprint or a boomerang painted up on NAIDOC Day. So frustrating. There's so much more that we need to learn. And I think that deep connection to country and that understanding that we are country, we are part of that country. Doesn't matter how much tar you put on the road, you can put shoes on your feet, you can put high-rise building. We're all connected to country. And I think once we start understanding it a little bit more, you start to appreciate the need to preserve and protect. And Parramatta River's a classic. Anyone who's lived around here knows that it's been an industrial wasteland. And, you know, even in the Sydney area in Circular Quay, the tank stream there, that was the first water, fresh water for those boats that came in. Within 2 years, they'd polluted that waterway. Like, that mentality has to change. The waterways are not a dumping ground. The waterways are actually life. They're our blood. They're things that we need to really be protecting. And I think traditional Aboriginal way was those waters were sacred places because they understood that connection, you know? They understand it. It's still important. So I guess it's a very hard thing to see in an urban environment how you can bring about some sort of change like that. But I think everyone can do little things that can just change and modify your imprint on the land. Anyway, I think I've talked enough. Thank you for listening, everybody. Didru Gulmana.